alarming thing that you uncovered in your 9-month investigation?
I think it was the level of systematic, intentional effort to shield from the village trustees and the public what the true financial state of the village was. I mean, we see in Mayor Henyard and her key people in her administration just this reckless disregard for governmental norms, spending on whatever she wanted without seeking any kind of budgetary approval, without looking to see whether or not the spending aligned with the budget, just doing whatever she wanted as if she was all powerful and had no accountability to anyone.
You mentioned Thornton Township
Mm-hmm.
and some issues, similar issues
Mm-hmm.
happening there. How concerned should residents in those 17 communities be about this?
I think they should be very concerned. Look, we only saw a little tip of the iceberg of what was happening in Thornton Township, but all the things that we saw suggested that the same kind of disregard for any kind of fiscal fiduciary responsibility, spending in excess, was happening in Thornton Township, but at an elevated level because it's a bigger budget. What we also saw was, lots of people having credit cards in their own name and spending it on a range of things that, if I were in Thornton Township government, I'd want to know, were these legitimate government purposes or not? I think there's a lot of questions that remain for what's happening in Thornton Township that hopefully, now that the government is back up and running, somebody will say, we need to have some oversight over this.
You also brought up her boyfriend, Kamal Woods, and the position he holds, and that was possibly he may not be qualified to hold that position?
Well, we have no idea because his personnel file had about 2 pieces of paper in it, and it was mostly the paperwork to get him paid. There was no resume, no background information, no letters of reference. So one doesn't know whether or not he's actually qualified to hold the job that he was given at taxpayer expense.
So residents have been asking lawmakers to step in, look at this for years. I've seen the letters.
Yes.
It's been going on. They've tried why is no one paying attention to what is happening in Dalton?
Well, let me say this. Yes, the residents of Dalton, as well as the elected officials there, have been asking for help at every level of government, state level, county level, and frankly, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the state's Attorney's Office, and most have not responded or turned a deaf ear to what's going on in Dalton, which is unfortunate because a lot of this stuff that we've uncovered could have been uncovered years ago had there been a consistent look at what was happening there. It didn't have to get this far for so many years, but those are questions that those other elected officials, I think, are going to have to answer. But what I will also say is what's happening in Dalton is not unique, unfortunately. There is issues across the Southland. And I know that because over the course of our work in Dalton, I've heard from elected officials in other Southland municipalities, other stakeholders down there who have told a tale of lack of transparency around finances, excessive spending, travel, and so forth that's happening in municipality after municipality. And they too are being shut out from getting access to information that they're entitled to as elected officials, and the public is being shut out through FOIA and otherwise. This is not a problem that is unique to Dalton, sadly. So I think hopefully this is a wake-up call for those other municipal leaders that eventually the pendulum is going to swing in your direction and that they really need to clean up their act. But it's going to take people standing up and demanding more, certainly going to the polls and voting, but also consistently being their own watchdog of what's happening in their towns or village and making sure that there's a light that's shined on the activities of these governments so that people don't enrich themselves or squander precious taxpayer dollars that aren't done and used in the benefit of residents in those municipalities.
With that in mind, in the other communities that this may be happening in, would you continue or would you do an investigation like this in another Southland community?
Well, I'm in discussions with some of those communities, and we'll see how things transpire. Certainly, I've had a lot of conversations and offered support and advice. We'll see whether or not I get involved again in another place. But I just think that there's a better way to do business. And look, I would also just say, as a black woman raised at a time when black people having any positions of power were such a rarity, my parents taught me, you got to represent not only just your family, but your community. And to see elected officials who are the same race as the people in their towns doing this to them, it hurts my heart. I mean, it really does. That was frankly a big motivating factor for me to get involved in Dalton. We can and do better. We have plenty of great examples across the country of black leadership that is excellent and doing things the right way. But it's harmful to everything that we stand for when we see this kind of conduct happening, as happened in Dalton and now Thornton Township.
It's interesting you say that, because Mayor Henyard is saying numerous times that people are coming after her because she is a black woman.
No, she's made a spectacle of herself. My family, my wife and I and my daughter, were in Houston last spring of 2024. My daughter had a AAU basketball tournament. And my wife and I stole away for one night to go to a local barbecue joint, but out of the main downtown area. And it's a tiny little place. You walk in, you got to queue up, you get a tray, cafeteria style, and you get your food. And as we walked in, there was a table of older gentlemen that were sitting, and they looked at me, and I thought, uh-oh, what is this going to be? So we just kind of shuffled through the line, and as we got close and I was rounding the bend, I heard somebody say, "Excuse me," and I thought I was standing in the way. So I moved out of the way, and the gentleman said, "No, don't go away." And I turned and I looked at him, and he said, "Are you going to get that, Mayor Tiffany Henyard?" Now this is down in Houston. And then he quickly said, "But if you do, I don't know what I'm going to watch on YouTube." And in some ways it's funny, but the fact is she made a spectacle of herself, calling herself the super mayor. All this spending, which was basically like a perpetual campaign, how did that benefit the residents of Dalton? It didn't. And now they've got a big financial mess that they're going to have to dig out of. But I'm encouraged by what I've seen and heard from the residents of that town. They understand what good government is about. They understand what they should be expecting from their elected officials, but they've got to show up and vote.
Is that your message to them, show up and vote?
You have to. I mean, you look at what happened 4 years ago in the election that made Mayor Henyard the mayor of the village. Only 9.5% of the registered voters voted. I've really never heard of a turnout that low. So I just think your vote is one of the most powerful tools in a democracy. You cannot complain about the government if you don't do your part to make sure you get a government that you actually deserve.
At the end, you mentioned that you'd given some recommendations to trustees that they were already trying to implement. Can Dalton right this ship and get back to what you say is good government?
Look, I'm 100% convinced that Dalton can come out of this dark period in time, but it's going to take people of goodwill, not exploiting the residents, but working on behalf of the residents. They obviously have a municipal election that's coming up here in about a month. That will, I think, really be a telltale sign as to whether or not they're able to move forward with leadership that is serving on behalf of the residents. They're going to need some help, I think, from the state legislature because their budget deficit's probably still around $6 million, but all the back debt that's owed really pushes them probably somewhere between 10 and 15 million. That's not an insurmountable amount, but if Dalton is going to have to fend for itself, then it is going to be a huge, huge challenge that they may not be able to meet. They're going to need some help from Springfield. There's no question about that.
Are you talking conservatorship, maybe?
No, I think that they're going to need to have, with strings attached, of course, but I think they're going to need to have some appropriation to help bail them out. There is a process that was put in place some years ago. I think they qualify for that, and I know that that's one of the things that's under discussion once they see what's the leadership of Dalton going to be going forward. is Mayor Henyard going to return, or is it going to be a new mayor, new board of trustees to lead Dalton forward?
2 more questions.
Yep.
The alleged victim in Las Vegas, you said she did not cooperate with your investigation.
Correct.
She has told me she did cooperate as much as her attorney would let her. What do you say to that?
Well, that may be true. Look, when you know, as a lawyer myself, I have an ethical obligation that I can't contact someone directly who's represented by counsel. We did try to get her cooperation. The other police officer who was a witness to cooperate, they're represented by the same attorney. We never heard back from that attorney. More recently, people came to me and said, hey, she wants to talk to you. And I said, I'm willing to talk to her, but she's got to get authorization from her lawyer. We never heard from them again. So she may have wanted to cooperate. She's the client. She didn't tell, obviously, a director lawyer to say, hey, I want to cooperate with Mayor Lightfoot's investigation. So what we know about it, we know from police records, we know from the litigation that has been filed. Obviously, people were in our ear about a lot of things, but that was one where we weren't able to make much progress on because we didn't get the cooperation of key witnesses.
Final question here. Any plans for you to run for mayor or any other office again, because your name is coming up a lot in a lot of circles?
No, you know what? I have no intentions of running for any office again under any circumstances. I had the best job in the world. Every day serving as the mayor of the city was an incredible honor. I don't see myself running for any other office again.
I lied, one more question.
All right, that's fine.
And you mentioned this the other night. Some people ask me, what's taking so long with the federal government? What's taking so long? There have been subpoenas.
Yeah.
Why? Any idea?
Well, I don't really know. And, you know, look, they're not going to bring charges unless they feel very confident that they're going to end up in a conviction. That's been the standing practice of the local U.S. Attorney's Office for decades and decades. What I will also say is, under longstanding Department of Justice policy, no charges can be brought against an elected official or else others that could have an influence over an election. There's a 90-day window that nothing can happen regarding charges before that election because, of course, the Department of Justice doesn't want to look like it's putting its thumb on the scale in favor or against a particular candidate or candidates. So the 90-day window really started back in November. Nothing's going to happen at least through the end of February, beginning of March, as it pertains to any elected official. Well, whether or not there are charges that are going to be brought against others, whether or not indictments that have already been announced will be superseded, I think those things, the latter, the superseding indictments, are definitely something that will probably happen. I think it's an open question as to whether or not there are going to be charges brought against Mayor Henyard or others. I don't think anybody knows that.
And again, another question I asked you the other night, with the changing of an administration, could this impact this investigation?
It certainly could. I would be surprised if it did. You know, every administration comes in with a set of priorities, and those priorities certainly are communicated through the Department of Justice and the office, the U.S. Attorney's offices across the country. I would be surprised if there was a change in the course of the investigation of the village of Dalton and lots of different folks as a result of the change in administration. Possible, but I'd be surprised if that happened.
I guess this is my final question, though. A lot of migrants did start coming here when you were still mayor, and as you see everything play out now, any comment on what's happening now?
Yeah, look, to be clear, Chicago's been a home for immigration and for migrants really from its earliest days. I mean, we were started and kind of founded by a Haitian immigrant and his Potawatomi wife. So this is part of our DNA, and people have been coming here for centuries, for decades. That's nothing different. And yes, we are an incredibly diverse city. That's one of our superpowers. And what we've seen, I think, play out, while it's gotten a ton of publicity, it's standard fare work by federal authorities. going after folks who have criminal histories, folks who have overstayed their visas. I haven't seen anything in the reporting, either here or elsewhere, that makes it look like this mass deportation, that saber that's been rattled over and over again. And look, I don't wish that on anyone. Having been the mayor in 2019, when a very similar set of saber rattling happened, the fear that has struck in the hearts of people that are just trying to live their lives, work hard, take care of their kids and their families. No one needs to have that sort of Damocles hanging over their heads. And unfortunately, this is the climate that we are in. This is the chaos that they like to create, and the fear without any regard for the consequences. I remember talking to a group of young girls back in the summer of 2019. They were involved in the After School Matters project on the south west side. And as the conversation progressed, I could tell there was this hesitancy and sadness. And these girls were preteens. They were about the same age as my daughter at the time. And what I learned is they lived in fear every single day that they'd leave home and come home to an empty house. That's one of the most direct consequences that happens when this chaos and fear is spread. Those children know what's going on. They're all English speakers, they all watch the news, and they're afraid of what's going to happen to their parents, their grandparents, the people who are taking care of them, and then feeling powerless to change the course of their own lives. I think about that often, and I think about it particularly in the context of what's been happening. Those young people out there and those families, they don't deserve this. They need a life that's stable. They need a home with loving parents, loving adults, and to live in fear every single day that they leave home to go to school or a job or to a summer job where they're performing, doing art projects to enhance the beauty of their community. They don't deserve to live in this kind of fear and chaos. And the thing that's concerning to me, and you're seeing it play out, yesterday it was shutting off all access to Medicaid, Social Security, benefits for veterans. They had to come and quickly do a course correct, but the damage gets done. People rely upon the government to support them. Our most vulnerable resident shouldn't be living in fear that they're not going to have a roof over their head, they're not going to have food in their mouths, clothes on their backs, get the vital medicine that they deserve, because this wrecking ball in a hurricane style of governance is happening.
It sounds to me like you miss being an elected official. Is that what I'm getting here? You miss being mayor?
No, I don't miss being mayor, but as a human being, part of the reason I ran for mayor is because I cared about our residents, and I wanted to do what I could on my part to really improve the quality of lives of people in the city. I've been very fortunate over the course of my life that I wasn't supposed to be and have the level of success that I achieved. That wasn't in my life's trajectory, but because of my parents, and particularly my mother, because of taking advantage of the opportunities that were in front of me, education, and a lot of people helping me along the way, I was able to live, and I live a very good, prosperous life. I care, and I want to continue to help. There's lots of different ways you can do that. And for me, it's going to be private citizen Lightfoot going forward.